Hello, fellow music nuts. It's me, Cubby, with another personal spin. And today I am ranking Deep Purple's albums. I have listened to these all week, and I have been both impressed and a bit shocked at times. And I think I have finally narrowed it down to the order that I like the most. Although, as always, they're a bit fluid, and next week, if I listen to them, I'll probably be totally different. But for the purposes of this video, I think I have managed to nail it. So here we go. Without further ado, I will go through them. Starting with my least favourite, we have the, the Book of Taliesin. Um, I found this album to be a bit meandery and sort of all over the place. I obviously it's their second album, so I give them a bit of leeway for that because they were still working out what they wanted to do. They were under a lot of pressure for singles and things like that. And there's quite a few covers, such as Kentucky Woman, which is actually quite good. But it just sort of I don't know, it just seemed to lack any purpose at all, and so it was a bit like, yeah, it's just not my favourite. It's just not my favourite at all. Next, we have their debut album, Shades of Deep Purple, with the best hair ever. Look at that. That is something extraordinary. Oh, look, here it is again. Look at that. That is amazing. This album, despite being their first album, which is why I found it a bit odd, is definitely more focused, more rocky. Not that that's any reason to like it more, but it's definitely more focused and it seems to have more oomph. Plus, it's got a hush on it, even though that's a cover. But yeah, I definitely like this one a bit more. Not much more though. Then we have Deep Purple, Slaves and Masters. Um, the weird thing about this album is it's actually quite good, but there's just something about it that just for me isn't particularly great. I think they were trying to be something that they're not, perhaps. I don't know, with the introduction of Jolyn Turner. I don't really know. But it's just not a good Deep Purple album. It's a good album, but it's not a good Deep Purple album. If that makes sense. Obviously, later on in the future, I will be reviewing these all in much greater detail. Next, we have The House of Blue Light. For me, this one just doesn't really work that well either. It's very. I mean, this door kind of says it all, really. It just feels. The whole album feels like this door. Basically, it's just sort of. It's a door. I know, doesn't make any sense, but exactly. Next, we have Bananas. I quite like this. Again, though, it feels a little bit sort of, I don't know, not quite right. It's a little bit all over the place, I found. I also don't really like Bananas. I love the taste, but the texture is terrible. If you're wondering what all these stickers are, I bought this album for like 10p from the library about 15 years ago. It's good, but with the introduction of Don Airey and Steve Morse, although he'd been in the band for a little while by this point, I feel like they're trying to work out how to put Don Airey's style into the music, and it's good, but it's not my favourite. It's definitely not like top of the line Deep Purple. Oh, it's gone dark. Oh well. Next, we have Deep Purple's third album, Deep Purple. This, even though it doesn't contain the Mark II lineup, sounds more like the Mark II lineup than the other two albums, and I can definitely see where they were going with Rod's vocals. They kicked him out basically because they thought he couldn't do the hard rock, as they called it, or the heavy rock, or whatever they called it. And I can kind of hear that. Like he's got a very sort of, it suits more like string arrangements and stuff like that. So I can see what they were thinking, like in their head. At the same time, though, I don't know if they ever asked him, "Can you just shout a bit and scream?" But anyway, they didn't, and so we ended up with Ian Gillan, who is just perfect. Certainly in the yeah. So that's the next album. So that's one, two, three, four, five, sixth favorite album now. Now we're getting into the seventh album, which for me is Stormbringer. A lot of people really like this album. For me, however, though, aside from the Soldier of Fortune and Stormbringer itself, the rest of the album is really sort of all over the place, soft, very melodic, which I quite like, but it's not very catchy. There's not really any cool riffs in it, and it's like a totally different band, really, although the album cover is pretty cool, especially with the unicorn without the horn. Einhorn, keine Horn von Unicorn. I have a unicorn cup I call Einhorn von Unicorn, which is German for one horn or unicorn from unicorn. Anyway, that's getting distracted. Next we have Who Do We Think We Are? Now this is an interesting album because when I first put my albums in order, this was very close to the top, but it has since dropped right down. Basically, apart from My Woman from Tokyo, the rest of the album is quite lackluster, really. It's a bit sort of boring, predictable, very bluesy. Not that there's anything wrong with blues, but I never really considered Deep Purple to be an actual blues band, and in this album they sort of just went full blues. And yeah, so I kind of changed my mind with it really and was like, well, actually, I prefer this album and this album and this album over it. So there we go. That's the 8th album for me. Obviously, this is all just my personal preference. Next, we have Perpendicular, released in 1990 something. I actually don't know when this one was released. It says 1996 on the back, but I thought Abandon was released in 1996. Perhaps that was 1998. Who cares? Anyway, Perpendicular is a weird one. It's good, but it's just not as good as some of the other albums. Basically, is the issue. If this was their only album, it'd be pretty good. But it's not, and so it sort of drops down literally because of that. For me, the songs just aren't as strong or as catchy, and the production is a bit dry, tired. They do sort of sound tired on this album, and so there you go. It's not my favourite. And then the same thing with Abandon, really. There's nothing wrong with the album per se, other than being slightly too long. But again, the production is a bit sort of tired. It just sounds tired. It's just basically Deep Purple by numbers, really. It doesn't really feel special or particularly engaging, and so it's just sort of. I listened to it 3 times, and every single time, by about watching the sky, my mind has sort of turned off because the production just sounds tired, and because it's so long, after that much tired production, my brain just turns off. Next, we have Fireball. I like this album. It's an interesting one because they're clearly experimenting with their song structures, and you get like a drum solo type thing in the Mule, which live is actually performed as a drum solo. This is the bonus version. I actually lost the slipcase for it, and it has a load of B-sides, including Strange Kind of Woman, which is a great song and should have been on the album. However, it's not. This album, they sort of try their hand at like full-on prog, I suppose, progressive rock, Rush style progressive rock. So it's still concentrated on the songs, but it's gets a bit noodly here and there, which I like, but it also detracts from the one thing that not the only thing that Deep Purple are really good at, and that is writing really good riffs and songs and stuff. So not my favourite, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's getting there to the top. That's what, the 10th album now? 11th album? And this next one is a bit of a shock for me. The first time I listened to this, I was like, what the heck is this? And the other day when I was having a bath, I thought, right, take this time to listen to one of the other Deep Purple albums, the one I'm not so familiar with. And Come Taste the Band, guys, is actually really good. Literally every song has at least one really catchy riff in it. Yeah, initially this was going to be like right at the bottom. I hated it the first time I heard it. I don't know why. I must have mistook it for Stormbringer or something. I remember this being all like being a disco band album for some strange reason, but it's definitely not. And Coverdale has really, really good vocals in this, and it's actually a really solid album. So it's actually quite high on my list, or it would be if Deep Purple didn't have such a big discography. Right, next up we have Rapture of the Deep. This one is pretty good. They finally worked out how they want to sound with their two new members. At least that's the way it feels with me anyway. We got some good lyrics from Ian Gillan. He's beginning to sound a bit old, but then he must have been 60 at the very least when they made this album. So it's fair dues. The production is good. The songs are catchy. I would argue it's a little bit long. Junkyard Blues goes on for something silly like 10 minutes. Maybe just a little bit too long. I'm going to move this book to see if it makes it lighter. No, it just makes me look really pale. I'm a vampire. So that's why that one's not my favourite. However, I do listen to this one a fair bit. Fair bit. Next we have... Now, a lot of people don't seem to like this album, but I really, really like it. The Battle Rages On. I'm guessing the fights and arguments and stuff must have been good for them, because Anya, The Battle Rages On, Lick It Up, Time to Kill, great songs. The riffs are really spot on. Blackmore's guitar sounds really alive. Roger Glover's bass, I think he produced it actually, didn't he? Yeah, or he helped produce it. That's probably why actually it is really buzzy with energy. In pace, as always, it's just in the background going, I just want to play drums, guys. Why can't we just play drums and your instruments? Like, he's been on every single Deep Purple album, and you can tell he's such a solid drummer. Everything he drums is tasteful, musical, solid, on beat, off beat sometimes if he wants it to be. He doesn't really show off that much. He just holds the band together, and he has done for the whole time of its existence. He's been on every album, and he does it again on this album. It's great. It's really good album. I really like it, and I did actually consider getting this dragon tattooed on my arm at one point. So yeah, don't know why people don't like this album that much. I think it's really good. Right, now we're getting into the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the top 7, just to be different. So next up we have one of their most recent albums, Infinite. What can I say about it? The band have finally found their new sound, like solidly, that they've replicated it from the last two albums. That makes it sound really boring, but it's not. Each song is really good. The band have become like song craftsmen. They know how to make a really good song, and then they just fill up an album of really good songs. And this one's quite short, which is quite nice. I don't mind long albums, but I find shorter albums, obviously because there's less material, easier to digest, and this is one of them. It's not that short, but it's just catchy, so it feels shorter. We've got Hip Boots, that's a cool one. Johnny's Band is kind of cool. I kept on calling it Jimmy's Band at one point because my nickname is Jimmy, along with being also known as Cubby. Roadhouse Blues is pretty good. Birds of Prey, and that album cover is pretty cool. And there's a new version that's purple, which I probably won't get, but I wish it had been purple to begin with. Next we have Perfect Strangers, their most 80s album, and they were obviously playing into the I'm not going to say hair metal, I'm going to say 80s metal sound, because this is the most metally sort of sounding album. But it's also really good, really, really catchy. Like, literally every song is really, really memorable. Perfect Strangers is really good. That's got kick-ass riff. So is Mean Streak, Knocking at Your Back Door. It's got a really kick-ass riff. A little bit long, perhaps, but it's good. Under the Gun, it's really good. The CD version actually contains 2 bonus tracks, but because this is the remastered version, it contains a bonus track called The Sons of Alaric, which is 10 minutes long. Again, also produced by Roger Glover, which is why it has such a good bass sound. And again, Ian Pace is just there like, yeah, cool, just give me some sticks, bro, and then beats the hell out of them. It's really good, really good. Little bit 80s sounding maybe, but it's good. Next up, we have Now What? Now What? I got the bonus version with the DVD, but I never actually ever looked at the DVD. Why is this one so high? I think for me, it was a real surprise that they were even releasing another album at this point. Everyone seemed to think that they'd sort of given up the ghost, being, cracking on for almost 70 by this point. Well, maybe not quite 70, late 60s. I certainly didn't think they were going to release another album. And then what did they do? They went and released this. This album is great. Don Airy really, really shines on this. It's definitely a sort of not a Don Airy album, but there's a lot of keyboard in it, a lot more than usual, and I quite like that. They're obviously saying, what can we do slightly differently, to what we normally do. And it's also dedicated to John Lord, which perhaps explains why Don Airy features on it so heavily. And yeah, they just sort of surprised everybody with this cracking album. Simple Song, Weirdest Dan, Above and Beyond, Blood from a Stone, Uncommon Man, all great tracks. Vincent Price, if I remember correctly, is also really good. But there's lots of guitar and keyboard interplay, which I really like. And then also Ian Pace, again, it's just they're like, yeah, I'm just gonna play. I think he's left-handed actually, so it's like this. But either way, it's really good, really, really good. I was dead impressed. So it had to be pretty high on the list. Next we have, now these last couple I've been spilling around for the last couple of days, but their newest album, Whoosh, I really like. I think it's really solid. Initially my first complaint was that the drums were pushed back too far, but it's actually only on Throw My Bones. Maybe it was a slight oversight that they didn't notice, but during most of the choruses and stuff, the snare drum like almost completely disappears, but then on the next song it doesn't. So I don't know. And they use different kits and sounds as well, so maybe that's what it is. But this album is really catchy. Like every single song is catchy, from the first to the last. So again, I really, really like it, and it's softer than their older stuff, and they definitely sound like statesmen for rock. Ian Glenn's vocals. He's 75. But he's still belting them out. But obviously they sound croaky and whatnot because he's 75. But give him his due, it's really good, and the lyrics are really good. Bass guitar is really good. Oh yeah, that was my only other complaint. It's obviously got a modern sort of production, so there's not as much space within the sound as there used to be. But it is a really solid album. Probably one of my favourites of this year. Sorry, I've got an itchy eye. Next, we have Coverdale's first album with the band, which essentially launched his career with Whitesnake, I suppose, after the next 2 albums. Burn is really good. It's got a bit of a wild sort of, it's like a funkier version of their best 2 albums, which I like, but I also, it's not quite as catchy, it's not quite as heavy, it's a bit more melodic, which is rather ironic because I think Richmore he's on it, isn't it? Richie Blackmore. I just called him Richmore. I meant Blackmore. No, yeah, he is. Oh, that might be why. Anyway, yeah, solid album. Really, really good. Obviously, everyone's opinion on all their albums will be different, but this is my current favourite ranking. Now, the last 2 albums, they're kind of tied. They could go either way, and you obviously already know, if you know Deep Purple's discography, which 2 they are. You can't see anything, so I'm going to turn this light on. There we go. That's better. We've got Deep Purple's Machine Head, and we've got In Rock. I cannot decide which one I like more. Machine Head is more consistent in its sound, with just basically 8 solid rock songs, and Smoke on the Water, which is kind of a ballad and slightly slower, but it's not as long as Child in Time. But Child in Time is just so epic, and the rest of the album is blazing. Excuse me, I have developed hiccups. So I can't decide. I think I'm going to go with In Rock as my favourite. It's just a little bit more nostalgic as well because my mum owns it on vinyl and she used to listen to it all the time. But quite a lot of the riffs on this one. This one's more riffy. That's whereas this one tends to be more power chordy, but not so riffy, but louder. I mean, you can hear the distortion in it because they just turned everything up. It's really really good though. Really really good. These two are definitely. Oops. If I was going to recommend a Deep Purple album, I'd say just get both of these first because that's how good they are. So we'll put them in the right order, shall we? There you go. Oh, and as a special mention, my favourite live album is Made in Japan. It's also my only live album, so you know, but it's really good. I don't know why England is so disappointed with his vocal performance because it's great. And there you go. That is the longest video I've made in a while, and it's my ranking of the Deep Purple discography. Thank you for watching. I have been Cubby. This has been a personal spin of Deep Purple's albums. If you like my videos, please like and subscribe and click the bell for notifications. And I will see you soon because I've got some reviews to do too. Thank you. Goodbye.